Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Price and CEO at Argyle Executive Forum, and welcome to this Argyle Executive Spotlight today, focusing on our 2024 marketing forecast. And in the next 30 minutes or so, I hope to illuminate for you some of the critical issues that we think you should be covering in the course of the sorts of planning that you might well have already done, as well as finalizing some additional thoughts to enter into your thinking. I'm going to, at the risk of skipping over more detail, try to bring in as much info as I can by focusing just on a few particular marketing essentials that we think are very, very important to cover. But having said that, I want to begin by talking about the new normals, what marketing is like in the context of the post-pandemic era, and the sorts of prevailing business conditions that we have to pay attention to because they have genuinely important impact. As is my want in the course of many of these webinars over the last couple of years, I like to bring demography into focus because in the United States, demography matters tremendously. We are, of course, the third most populous country on Earth, and of course, the world's largest generator of gross domestic products, generating something like $2.5 trillion a month, about 27 trillion this year, I believe. And so even the smallest proportionate change in population behavior matters a great deal in terms of its economic impact. And with that in mind, there's one in particular that takes place shortly that I'll be talking about. But happily, we are back to normal when it comes to things such as airport traffic as an indicator of looking something like the way things were. And of course, this is as much a measure of perhaps the resilience of the consumer economy, which appears to have avoided a recession. But on the other hand, there's still plenty of evidence that we may have had something like a business recession. The last quarter of this year saw the largest number of startup failures and bankruptcies recorded in the last several years. So we've certainly seen plenty of evidence at Argyle of lots of challenges in the business sector, and in particular the IT sector. And it's worth noting that perhaps we haven't quite shaken that off as we go into next year. And on the subject of demography, one of the observations I want to focus on a little is that by 2024, it's almost the case now, there will be more Zoomers than boomers. That is to say, Gen Z will overtake boomers and eventually within the next couple of years take their place as the largest single cohort of the population. And this is incredibly important, as generational change in the US economy typically is, but it's seems even more important because there's such a different generation compared to their grandparents, or indeed even their parents. They are the video generation, as evidenced by their social media habits. They are increasingly much more inclined to engage in what essentially is the most video literate of media platforms, namely, of course, YouTube, Instagram, and of course, TikTok, which has come out of nowhere largely on the back of its popularity with this particular generation. And that is very meaningful for lots of reasons, not least of which is that if Gen Z is part of the evolving management team that you're trying to reach out to in the course of your B2B marketing, then video becomes an essential feature if you're to make strides in engaging with them. They are culturally extremely different. And I use this perhaps as an extreme example, but it is so noticeable just how different Gen Z, and by the way, their predecessors, millennials, are when it comes to issues such as sexuality and culture generally. Look how significant the size of population identified by Gen Z with LGBT as a difference compared to prior generations. It's not a small difference. It's a really significant difference. Maybe they're just more candid. Maybe they're just more comfortable. I won't get into the reasons why, but it's one of the reasons to think about Generation Z, Zoomers, as being somewhat different when it comes to, not just somewhat, quite different when it comes to cultural attitudes and certain behaviors, not least of which is this very striking trend in the United States in particular, which I've noticed over the last several years in terms of reduction of living with spouses at the ages of below 40 to this remarkable increase, which is largely being driven by millennials and Gen Z, of living with parents or relatives. Now, these are not small numbers. Nearly a third of those between the age of 25 and 34 are living with parents or relatives, and there are clearly economic reasons why. It's very expensive to buy a house in many markets. It's wage growth perhaps hasn't kept up nearly as much as it could have with respect to rents or even the cost of housing. But regardless, this has enormous importance because the economic consequences of these behaviors is a change in the way in which people go about consuming things, forming homes, taking mortgages or paying rents, or, as is the case, not doing so. And particularly this cultural change in a reduction in the size of the population. Look how significant from the 1960s to the 2020s, how significant a change, practically halved the number of folks in this age cohort who are living with a spouse, and it doesn't seem to show any sign of reducing. Of course, it would be wrong not to think about the other very important business condition that seems to be prevailing in change since the end of COVID, and that, of course, is this emergence of the hybrid workforce, the trend away from working in office to working both in office and at home, or, as is the case, depending on the age you're in, the likelihood is that if you are in the 22 or at least under 40 age bracket, there is a significant percentage of that population, fully a third of that population, who are most likely to be in hybrid circumstances, either working from home or working on site, doing one of the other, as well as a significant percentage working from home. This is important because it does begin to change the context within which we start thinking about, well, how do we get engaged with folks who are moving in between one or another? And what differences does that make to the way in which we try to persuade them to think about our products and services in a B2B context? But what is very, very clear is that when it comes to folks in the knowledge economy, white-collar workers, those working in creating or adding value to knowledge and transferring knowledge as a service, that the likelihood is that you'll spend a lot fewer days per week in the office than normal compared to pre-pandemic and compared to other industries. Now, the observation I make on other data I've seen in this very same context is that also means not only knowledge workers in knowledge-based industries such as professional services, information, finance, and so on, but knowledge workers that are within a particular industry, which may not be knowledge-based, but because they are taking advantage of either hybrid work circumstances or working from home circumstances. So this is something to be very, very conscious of, I think, when it comes to marketing, for reasons that I'm going to point out a little later on specifically, but something important to think about going forward in terms of your marketing strategy, because there's clearly a sort of permanence to this, and it's being driven by the fact that those employers offering fully flexible arrangements appear to be growing more quickly than others. Now, this is, again, one set of data from one survey, very recent survey. All of the data I'm presenting today, by the way, is no more than 12 months old. However, what's important about this is that it's pretty consistent with other stuff that I've seen on this very same subject. There's a lot of reasons to think about. Clearly, there's a great deal of competition for great talent these days. It's very popular for folks to be able to choose between working from home and working from office. I could go on, but it's interesting that there seems to be this correlation on flexibility with regards to this arrangement. And if you happen to be in the business of marketing a product or service that enables more flexibility in this arrangement, then you're in a very, very good position. It would be remiss of me to get into specific marketing recommendations without talking about AI. Clearly, we are on the precipice, if you wish, of an extraordinary change in the impact of AI in business. And like lots and lots of other technology, AI appears to be accelerating. It's hit this very important point in the curve of heading towards exponential growth. In other words, compounding on prior growth to accelerate even faster. This is one of the reasons we need to pay attention to this very important technology trend, is because it's going to start going even faster, just like the internet did, just like mobile phones did. Once technologies hit this curve, they really become very, very fast in their impact. And there are, of course, lots of flavors of artificial intelligence, and I'm not going to belabor the differences between one or another for now, except to say that there are a couple for marketing that I think are very, very much worth paying very close attention to, and I'm going to get to that now. And should come as no surprise, I'm sure, to any of you that this is a hyper-competitive space. There are, at this count by this particular survey, fully 55 smart AI-powered tools just for sales, much less other parts of the marketing mix, much less other parts of business. And so clearly we have a challenge here in working through what is going to be right for our business, if you haven't already, as well as, I think, this very important division forming around two big AI operating systems, ChatGPT being one of them, and another, just like we did with Microsoft and Apple. We might be looking at this very important decision between which AI operating system or large language model we have to go with. So without further ado, and thinking about those things that are circumstantially very important, I think, when it comes to business conditions we face in 2024, I wanted to share with you some thoughts about 3 or 4 very important marketing essentials we think you should be very mindful of for next year. And the first of those, of course, is AI for marketing. And we think there are 2 in particular that make it important for their application, for AI's application to marketing, and that is its capacity to supercharge analytics, and secondly, its capacity to generate content in particular media. And let's just reflect on that for a second. There are lots of good reasons why AI for marketing analytics in particular is going to be very important, because it's very timely. The age-old question of where my dollars are getting the best return for their investment is still, to a large extent, unanswered. Even with the onset of digital media, there's still large chunks of the marketing management population who are still not confident as they'd like to be in the data sources or the ROI, hence data, that's informing those decisions. And this is just really the probably top 8 or 9 of those digital channels to consider. We all know there are many, many more that are still analog relatively, but are necessary for one reason or another. So anything that helps sort through the data question and improve analytics the way these AI-based models can, ingesting large lumps of enterprise level data and sorting through that data at rapid speed, finding correlations that we wouldn't have otherwise found. Obviously, that's got a lot of stickiness to it. It is, as a corollary of that, highly relevant. And it's highly relevant because personalization is a critical component to large-scale digital database marketing, such as email marketing and other activity. And just with these 8 variables alone, there is an enormous amount of data dynamics to consider when shaping the best strategic choices that you want to make, and hence anything that can help sort through what are the most important variables and which are the least important variables in this sort of quagmire of data is obviously very, very relevant, because it matters when it comes to getting more engagement. And finally, I'd say, of course, it's highly necessary. And one of the most obvious ways in which it's highly necessary is digital marketing is an absolute beast when it comes to feeding content. We need lots and lots of up-to-date, relevant content to provide to the many very important platforms that are out there. And what's becoming very apparent is that short-form video and recommendation engines are displacing the first generation of social media. And TikTok is perhaps the most obvious example that within just a few years, about 5 years since launch, it's already harnessing well over $10 billion of revenue, because it has such a strong engagement amongst the primary user, which is, getting back to my earlier observation, pretty much everybody under the age of 34 or so. Look towards video marketing as being so much more important in the scheme of things, particularly for B2B marketers. And so anything, particularly these very, very impressive new AI applications, these generative content applications that are converting static media into video media, helping marketers create short-term video, which is very, very engaging and looks incredibly professionally done. Look towards that as an opportunity for your business in helping deal with this very, very challenging issue. So my takeaways for AI for marketing are that there are 2 big marketing applications. It's in terms of marketing analytics to sort through the clutter, and secondly, in generative content AI. And this will, as a result, help you lead your way towards more effective database marketing, particularly email marketing, but SMS, of course, and other very targeted database-driven marketing. And that high-volume content marketing becomes so much more enabled for you, because the affordability of generating content will be, I think, brought well within your means as a result of choosing some of these quite sharp generative content, in particular short format video. Now, it's an extension of the same subject in a sense, but I think it's very worthy to focus on hyper-personalization, because hyper-personalization in the age of digital marketing, as well, fueled by improvements in how we manage database marketing, is so valuable, given how competitive we all know our markets are and how many of us are competing for the attention of this relatively small population of B2B decision makers all the time. It's obvious that data is incredibly important as a strategic advantage, and the evidence of this is simply in the consistent rise since 2020 alone in the total value of expenditure by marketers on procuring marketing data. It's a $3.9 billion market already. It's changing at a pretty consistent but smallish rate. Regardless, this tends to reinforce just how valuable marketing data is when it's generating these sorts of sizes of expenditures. The second strategic advantage is because it's simply critical to understand marketing data insights or gather marketing data insights when so much of the B2B economy is trending towards e-commerce. It's already well over the 20% range in terms of total transactions or total value of transactions in B2B. And while the rate of growth is decelerating, it's still a pretty healthy 10% or so that we see. So it's not going to take much longer for certain segments of the B2B markets to see much more significant shares of B2B e-commerce taking on total sales. And this just reinforces that your ability to manage data and drive hyper-personalized experiences that set your communications aside from your competitors becomes even more strategically important. This, of course, is very important because we see this generational change going on. I opened up talking about the importance of demography, and it's certainly going on when it comes to buyers in terms of B2B by age group. Fully 59% of B2B buyers are in the 26 to 40-year-old cohort. So there are the earliest members of Gen Z entering the workforce, potentially taking place in roles involving communities of influencers in the B2B buying process. There are millennials, their older sisters, their older brothers, perhaps, so to speak. And there's late stage Gen X involved now in the majority of B2B buyers, so to speak, as a total of all buyers. 30% still are in this Generation X or late millennial Gen X quadrant, but you can see this declining number of baby boomers who are leaving the workforce and reflected in the lower proportions of these ages. And of course, this has tremendously important impact in making choices about where to invest money to reach these folks, how to communicate with them, the sorts of content that they like to be communicated with, and so on. And what I think is also very, very important is there's this clear multi-channel process followed by the average B2B buyer that is influencing decisions before they even want to take a meeting. This is very consistent data with other data I've seen in the same processes, that there is a substantial majority who go to suppliers' website, they attend webinars that are hosted by suppliers to get more information in their research process. They conduct research on the supplier using a variety of other means, which probably are going to be search driven, and then they evaluate the supplier using peer review sites in a good number of cases. This process of research and evaluation before the meeting takes place is very consistent in the way in which the B2B sales process has evolved over the last several years with digital's impact on it. And also, I think it's one of the reasons that we're seeing longer purchase cycles. When asked in this survey, which was late last year, how had the length of purchase timeline changed for B2B executives in North America, there's this general agreement that it's increased either somewhat or significantly, but it's certainly increased. The majority believing that it's increased but significant, and not the combination saying it, yes, it's increased, and only, well, 38% saying it's stayed the same. I think this is a real watch out, because the correlation there is the increasing community action that B2B buying represents. It's not just one decision maker. It's often a bunch of different influences of various levels that have got something to do with the buying decision, as most of you, I'm sure, are experiencing. And that's why it matters to be thinking about, firstly, have I got the customer journey right when I'm thinking about mapping my buyer? Am I allowing enough time, or allowing for enough time in my lead generation, lead nurturing, and lead conversion process? And by the same token, am I customizing content for maximum engagement, and so on? So my key takeaways here is that the customer journey mapping for you is vital to make sure that you've got the most appropriate perspective on the stages in which your B2B buyer is going through in mapping out their purchase decision, or arriving at their purchase decision. What are the media they're using? What are the web behaviors that are important to you, and how might you need to adjust them as you begin to know that better? That more relevant and timely communications is essential to improving engagement and leading to more lead generation. And the number one way in which to drive lead generation is through personalization, because this drives engagement. It is the number one attribute of most effective lead generation communications. And multi-channel campaigns are absolutely essential to drive conversion, because it is a multi-channel process that the buyer is going through. So making sure that you're engaging folks at the right time and the right place in the right frame of mind becomes very, very important to all of those important goals. Now, I do want to wrap up quickly on one thing that we've become very, very committed to in the context of event marketing, which is taking a more integrated event marketing approach, because of the aforementioned dynamics, both in the marketing climate and in the business climate as well. Events continue to represent somewhere between 8 to 10% of average B2B marketing budgets. So it's not a small item. You are in pretty good company when thinking about what are your peers doing. Investments in event marketing continue to be a key member of the marketing budget consideration. And it's no surprise to some extent, because events and webinars, perhaps pretty much in the same bucket, are still attributed by CMOs in B2B companies on average as being the strongest when it comes to generating qualified leads for the top of the funnel. Now, of course, there's some overlap in all of these things, but this combination of content marketing in white papers and videos, along with case studies, events, and webinars, is clearly a very powerful combination, because all of these tactics are highly endorsed by CMOs of B2B companies for their effectiveness in the lead generation process. Webinars are in particularly strong company when it comes to being a source of information for research by B2B buyers. This is very consistent with our own research amongst our own customers, because we do a tremendous amount of business in producing webinars for customers, but also because it's an excellent companion to the need to provide to B2B buyers who are in the discovery and research phase a source of one channel along with other complementary channels of good content. Our view is the answer today is a more integrated event marketing approach. In other words, a top to the bottom of the funnel approach that allows you to place the various event experiences and the complementary marketing tactics around those experiences in the right place along the funnel. Now, clearly, as I've said, there's overlap, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but it's a starting place to help organize for what we've seen as being a much, much stronger way of taking leads from the top of the funnel, which we position live and virtual events to continue to do, as well as then supporting those new leads with conversion through webinars and webinar-like experiences, and continuing to nurture them with content marketing in the same ecosystem of different event experiences for the webinar, for the sales funnel, to end up with more intimate event experiences such as workshops and dinners to support the closing process. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but we think that over the years that we've started to see the effects of bringing these different events and their experiences along with content marketing together, planned in such a way that they complement one another, we've seen very, very strong improvements in conversion rates and in lead generation quality. And so when thinking about event marketing, we would urge you to think about integrating event marketing using a top to bottom of the funnel approach. Folks, there is so much more I'd love to talk about in the course of the 30 minutes or so that we allocate to this webinar, but I hope today that you've found this illuminating and perhaps brought some new thinking along to your plans for next year. We would be delighted to help you when it comes to integrated event marketing and other thoughts that we have to help you be successful in 2024. And for that reason, I wish you the very best of luck. A copy of this presentation you'll find access to shortly after, as well as we'd be delighted to take on any questions that you think of that you are most welcome to reach out to me at pprice@argyleforum.com. And please do connect with me at LinkedIn on Paul N. Price. Thanks again and good luck for 2024. Thank you.